All right. Three, two. Hello, everyone. My name is Michael Van Heis, and I am the Executive Director of Missio Nexus. And I am here today with some friends to talk to you about our brand new Church Mission Leader Survey report. We are so excited to launch this. We do this report about every 3 years, and we have gone out and surveyed a number of churches across North America, both small and large, who have been part of our report. And we're very happy this year just on the diversity of churches and their engagement in missions. And today, I have three friends with me on this Zoom call that we're recording for you today to give you a little bit of perspective from church mission leaders on this report and what's going on at the local church. So with me today is Carlos Negron, who's my partner in crime. He is our Director of Church Engagement at Missio Nexus. Go ahead and say hi, Carlos.
Hello, hello. God bless you.
It's good to have you here with us. Carlos and I have a lot of fun working together and serving churches in our community. We have Laura Marcias, who is with us, Director of Missional Engagement at Trinity United Presbyterian Church. And you're out there in California, isn't that right, Laura?
Yes, I am in Santa Ana, California.
It's awesome to have you with us today. Thank you so much for joining us. And last and certainly not least is Josh Morrison, who is with us today. He's in Pennsylvania right now, but he's from Columbia, South Carolina, and he's a volunteer leader for church missions at his local church, and also helps lead a network of Great Commission focused churches down there in Columbia, South Carolina, and spends a good amount of time working for World Team as a mobilizer too. So he wears a few different hats. Josh, thanks for taking time amidst your travels to be with us today.
Good to be here.
Awesome. Well, we're gonna let me overview a little bit about this report. I'm sure some of you watching this haven't opened it yet. There's 82 pages awaiting you in the report this year, and I'm thankful for our team that we have at Missio Nexus who've helped put that together for me, and just great graphics and different information. You're going to see charts and graphs, and there's articles in there from 10 different leaders in the Missions Association to give you good practical advice. There's a couple good book lists and resource lists to lean into. One of our hopes at Missio Nexus is not just to throw data at you and hope you figure it out, but we really want something to be actionable for you to be able to read through it, look at it, gain understanding, and then apply things to your life in ministry as a leader. This year, we had 132 church mission leaders take part in our survey from 32 states and 2 Canadian provinces. So we're thankful for those 2 churches up in Canada who took part in it too.
Yes.
And we look at a wide range of things of cross-cultural engagement, mission funding, programs, more things than we're going to cover today in 30 minutes. And there's some great pages in that report. You go through one of my favorite pages we're not going to talk about today, just gives definition. How do churches define what is a missionary? What is missions? What does cross-cultural missions look like? And those are great tools for you to sit down with your church leadership team or your missions leadership team and say, hey, how do we define this? And I bet that you're going to have a lot of different answers, even amongst your own team, on some of those different things. Well, we're gonna start off a little bit today, and I'm going to ask our panel here just on some reflections as you thought about this report and you read through it. Was there anything that very uniquely just kind of stuck out to you as you thought about this and the importance of these types of topics for church mission leaders today? So, Carlos, you're interacting with church mission leaders all the time. Anything stick out to you?
Absolutely, absolutely. So interact with, as you mentioned, church mission leaders daily, and which I love it. I love it. But something that I see, and it did stick out, it's something that we continuously see when it comes to church mission leaders. And I ask the question, what's going on in your world and what do you need? How can we come alongside? How can we collaborate? And it's very clearly seen here as you go through the report. I'm not going to go one by one everything that we see. That's why you're able to get the report and see what it is, but we will discuss some of those things. For example, when it comes to resources, this is going to provide resources right there for you to use in whatever it is that you might need, but also networking when it comes to meeting others that are like-minded, like-hearted, that are local church leaders, mission leaders, etc. And you see here some of those numbers and you kind of go, wait, So then this is happening. This is a trend. I'm not alone. And I love seeing that when I look at this report.
Yeah, that's great. How about you, Josh? What'd you see?
Yeah, first off, just thankful for this report, thankful for just the sample size of, of churches that are looking at these areas and passionate about the Great Commission and providing insights into that. It's helpful to see a perspective outside of, what you only see. And so engaging with other leaders and then getting a little bit bigger scope of what's going on and some of the resources like Carlos is talking about that are out there, so the trends that are happening, just found overall just helpful to look at this and see what's happening and to think strategically about what that looks like. I think collaboration is huge, and so in the local churches, and so the ability to be able to pull data like this and talk about it and interact with it is exciting.
Yeah, super great. How about you, Laura?
Much the same way. I think it answers a lot of questions that in your everyday life and even here at work at my church, I'm always wondering about, how's funding going with other churches? How is our funding compared to others?
Yeah.
What does it look like to have short-term mission opportunities then become long-term missionaries? And so you're wondering all these things, and you have just a potpourri of questions, and you're thinking, well, I sure would like to sit down over coffee sometime and see if does anybody have all these answers. And I think the report does that. I think the report allows you to answer some of those gaps that you've been wondering. And so I think it does a masterful job in giving you just enough. It's not an encyclopedia, it's a
Right.
report, and it's so
Yeah.
helpful just to have that in itself.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you. That's great. Yeah, I mean, we feel so isolated often in our communities, and it's hard to gauge what are other people thinking about? How are they dealing with this? How did they set their budget? What are they calling things? And this gives us a little bit of a glimpse into a broader community. It's super helpful. One thing I wanted to mention about all four of us on the panel today, it's kind of interesting. We have all had experience in the local church and on the mission field with mission agencies. We work for mission agencies or do work for mission agencies and have had experience related to being in missions in different roles. So we're going to lean into that a little bit of time. We've all had experience with both the church hat and the agency hat. And so there may be times that we lean into that today to help us look through some of this. Well, one of our first items we're going to talk about at the beginning of the report is related just finances of missions and what's going on. Of the 132 churches that we surveyed, $47 million is going out for international cross-cultural missions from 132 churches. I mean, it amazes me. $47 million is no little bit of change. That's a good amount of money. And that's going out. Budgets range from anywhere from 1% of their overall church budget going to missions, all the way up to one church in our demographic had 89% of their budget going to global missions. Again, those were the ends of the spectrum. Most churches ended about 10% was the average, a little 10, 11%. There were a few churches who were around 33% where they had paid about a third of their budget was going to missions. So we saw a wide range of funding. And the other thing that I think you would naturally think is that the larger the church, the more they're giving to missions. When I was a missions pastor, I was at a church of 15,000. We had a $2 million mission budget. We gave that money out. That church had a lot of resources to be able to give around the world. Well, the thing that was interesting to me looking at this report was size did not necessarily determine budget. There were a lot of small churches out there with really big mission budgets, and there were a lot of big churches who barely gave very much of their overall budget to missions. So a lot of diversity in that realm. So for our panel here, how do you see financial priorities shaping mission strategy at your church? When you're having those conversations, let me put it this way, does missions lead the conversation, or do finances lead the conversation about what you're going to do in missions? And what should that be like in a local church? So Laura, Josh, any thoughts on that? They're thinking.
I think it's a little bit of both.
Okay, yeah.
It really almost depends on the year and what our financial situation looks like. It can be where perhaps mission leads the finances but the following year could be the contrast. So I would not be able to say that it's consistent, but I do know that we have a very committed congregation in missions. And so as a result, it's always in the forefront. It's never in the backdrop. And as a result, people know that there is a lot of difference that we're making because we're equipping or empowering, or our partners are expressing a particular need, and so we're answering. There's a very relational aspect to the way we go about global missions at our church. And so when we do see that maybe project, or we do see that missionary asking for something above and beyond, we identify, oh, we know who they are.
Yeah, right.
They're a part of us. So it's almost like having a photo album, a family album on the screen on a given Sunday. And you're able to say, oh, identify with that family member. And so it's a good place.
That's great. That's good. Josh, I know you go to a smaller church, and sometimes what smaller churches mean smaller budgets, but how even at a small church with a limited budget can you maximize your impact in global missions?
Yeah, good question. I think that there are a lot of different kinds of resources, but we're here speaking specifically the finances. But what we have found is, and this touches both that question and the one you just asked, but the mission strategy piece, when we are engaging with and making the strategy, the purpose of mission clear, oftentimes the finances follow that and people investing in that. And so I think one of the ways you maximize that is, telling that story clearly of why we're involved and, the biblical basis to missions and making that really clear what the purpose is here. And at least in our experience, I think that the funding of it, the resourcing of it often follows that, or, we hope it does.
Yeah, totally. That's great. Well, I'm going to keep us moving. We could labor in a number of these points for a long period of time. We don't have that today. Hey, Carlos, one of the second sections we deal with in this report is related to helping church mission leaders thrive in their role and what helps them thrive in their role. So what did you notice in that report? And as you've talked to church mission leaders, what are those things that help church mission leaders, whether they're a volunteer or full-time staff, grow and exceed in carrying out their role in the local church?
Absolutely. So as I mentioned earlier, when I speak with leaders across the nation, Canada, well, now we have members in some other places in the world, but as I speak with them and I ask them that question is, what is it that you need to be able to fulfill and thrive in your role? I continuously receive, number one is always resources, resources. But number two is that connection to other church mission leaders. And when you look at the report, you definitely see that, when it comes to the greatest influencers for church mission leaders, number one, 78% global travel. Of course, you go to the field, you're impacted in a way that you will not be impacted any other way. But the second biggest would be connections with other church mission leaders. So that's something that the report absolutely shows, that we see that going on, and it's real. And when I speak face to face, and it hundreds now that I've spoken to face to face, ask these questions, just kind of get to know what's going on in their world and take the pulse of what's happening in the world. That's what I see, that desire and that need to feel like I'm not this island by myself out here. There is a whole community that is there, and we can collaborate, we can work together, we can do this together.
That's awesome.
Mm-hmm.
Josh, I know that part of what you do is help coordinate a network there in South Carolina of churches who are Great Commission focused.
Right.
That collaboration Carlos talked about. How do you see that there, and what's been a benefit of that type of relationship?
Yeah, so we have a variety of churches from across different denominations working together, and we talk about as Great Commission collaboration. And it's been so cool to see what different churches, some churches in our network have just a wealth of missions experience within it, others more on the member care side, others with more financial resources or training. And so to see the body of Christ, big picture, coming together to collaborate in that, bringing different resources, breaking down some of those just silos of, we're doing this here, but to work, it's a lot of fun. It's a lot of fun to work with other brothers and sisters from different backgrounds and to learn from them and to share together. And so it's been, I think, really encouraging, and just gives a bigger picture of what God's doing in the world as we hear those stories from different vantage points and get to share gifts and a little sample of this, the body of Christ being the body, I think.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah,
No,
yeah.
that's
And
really
if I may say,
yeah.
it's a beautiful thing to see in action. Because we talk about collaboration all the time. We mention, oh, sure, we're the body of Christ, we're one body. But when you see it in action, it's a beautiful thing. I've been blessed to be able to be with Josh down there in Colombia and see them working and being together in action. And it's beautiful. And if it's doable, it can happen, it can definitely happen.
That's right. That's
Mhm.
right. That's good. Well, we're going to jump to our next topic, and that is short-term and long-term missions, which the report goes into details on both, worth digging into there. And Laura, as we look at some of these things, 55% of the churches said they send out 1 to 4 short-term teams every year. 39% send short-term teams primarily to supported missionaries of their church. 79% prioritize missionaries with a strong home connection when they're sending out those teams. So from your vantage point, what are the things that we can ensure that short-term missions are done well and connected back to the local church?
Oh, that's a great question. Well, I truly believe that that short-term missions is part of discipleship. So it's not it's not an event. It's actually part of the life of the church, and that's how one of the elements about discipleship. And so one of the things that I like to do, for example, is to have a theme or a focus when we are sending out a team. So that if our focus is to learn about the persecuted church or it's to learn about indigenous church leaders, then that becomes more or less the focus. And so you would do incorporate prayer and devotions and all kinds of things, but we tighten up the purpose of the short-term trip under discipleship, and then we say we're going to actually talk now about the back end of short-term missions, so that by the end of your trip you're going to continue to be that person. So if we're going to, for example, focus on prayer as one of those elements, an outcome that we'd like to see, we're going to make sure that that happens before the trip, during the trip, and after the trip.
That's right. That's right.
And so if you frame it within discipleship, then it just becomes an extension of who you are.
That's right.
But now it's more of a blessing because you've seen it and you've seen others, especially if you go to certain parts of the world where they have a very robust prayer life.
Mhm.
Then you kind of see that, and that stays with you long after you come back.
That's right. Oh, so good. That's excellent. I love that word discipleship. That is so key with younger generations, particular church today. The term missions has become kind of watered down and loose. And there really is a process of helping people understand God's heart and love for the nations and moving them along a pathway for their engagement and not making assumptions about what they may know or we think they know, but it's a process. So that word is that's
Yes.
great. Well,
Yeah.
one of the things we also look at here throughout the report, there's different sections that look at priorities and missions and areas of ministry that churches are focused on. At Missio Nexus, we like to talk about the big three: church planting, discipleship, and evangelism. We're passionate about that. We want to see churches and mission agencies involved in that. Carlos, I know you were a missionary in Southeast Asia. How important was it when you were out as a missionary to know that your churches back home were passionate about things like church planting and evangelism and discipleship?
So it's really cool, interesting that you say that. The church, our sending church, was actually a small church, but that small church actually covered 70 to 80% of our support.
Wow.
So it was really important for them to really be involved, for them to really be bought in or understand the importance, and to take care of us, even though we were being sent and we went with a missions agency, but they were the ones that sent us. So it was really important for us for us that the church really understood the importance of what we were doing, global missions being sent from
That's
that
right.
small church. And I mean small, but they understood the importance. So that small church said, no, we are sending you as much as we can. So that was really cool to see.
That's good.
Hmm.
Laura or Josh, how important is it for a church to understand kind of their unique calling as a church related to ministry overseas, being able to identify that, understand it, and then connect with partner organizations who have expertise in those areas. Is that an important thing that churches should be thinking about?
I think so. I think so. When you think about the global north, and often we'll say within our churches, we think Christianity is shrinking. It looks like in the U.S. Things are not going well. Well, what I'd like to say to members of our congregation is that the global north, when we look at global Christianity, is shrinking, but it's not that it's shrinking; it's shifting, right?
Mhm.
So the global south is actually where you see the majority of global Christians. So I say to our partners or our congregation members, be encouraged. God is still on the throne. God is on the move. But he is doing things that I think we should be encouraging and things that we should be a part of. Don't count yourself out. Don't count out the U.S. church. Play a role in it and celebrate what God is doing. And
That's
when you
right.
frame it in around those terms, then it's like, oh, I did not know that. I thought, that it was just a done deal. And it's like, no, God's not done.
Yeah,
How does that work?
that's right.
And if I may,
Yeah, Josh.
I think that's really well said. I think it is really important for, people in our churches, each one of us to understand how it ties into the global purposes of God. I think it's hard to have that ownership of it in finding your place in God's mission without that clear message and clear understanding of it. And without that, you don't have that desire to pray, that desire to connect with those workers and be invested in their ministry. And so I feel like it's really important for people to understand how all the different pieces fit together in the local context when we talk about evangelism and discipleship and church planning and what's done here, wherever here is, and how that impacts what is being done among the nations. We're the nation.
So true. So true. Josh, I'm going to ask you another question as I was thinking about it here. One of the sections in the report that we highlight that I think is really valuable is the relationship between churches and agencies and the conversation that needs to be going on back and forth between those. And I think sometimes our focus is on the missionary, understandably, and not on the two entities that are caring for that missionary. And so you're in that unique position of wearing two hats. So just maybe a moment here on why is it so important for agencies and churches to have a relationship with each other?
Yeah, absolutely. And it's the church sending out the worker and the agency partnering with them to send out, but to provide some of that cross-cultural expertise, so to speak. And every church is a little bit different, and some churches have more of that cross-cultural expertise, and others there's just learning that goes both ways. But I think when we're talking about caring for a missionary that's being sent in the church, sending them out. The more the relationship is there, the better we can provide that care. And I've been in missions mobilization for World Team for over 12 years. And the missionaries I feel like that you see staying that long-term view are those with a strong church.
Yeah,
The
that's right.
stronger that church connection is there. And when an agency can come alongside and work with that church, I think it's really, again, representing that collaboration, the bigger picture, and the body of Christ working together as we send out, and each having a unique role and part in that. So I think that relationship is vital.
That's great. That's awesome. Well, the last topic we're going to jump in here before we have to close things down for today is looking at the next generation of missions. As we were prepping for this, this was something we all felt our hearts resonating with. We want to see the next generation brought up in missions. But there are some significant challenges that face our next generation. I was talking to a member care expert just the other day, talking about what we've done better job of caring for people on the field, but we're having so many young people who are going to the field now with anxiety issues and just mental struggles and challenges that we have to deal with from the very front end, not just after somebody's been on the field. There's unique challenges that way, but there's also an information and engagement that word, Laura, you brought up a discipleship for the next generation. I know you're passionate about this. What do you think we need to focus on as a local church to see that next generation truly raised up for global missions?
Yeah, It's an excellent question. I really believe in starting early. Therefore, when you think about the children's ministry, you should involve missions into it, right? So you should have, when we have our visiting missionaries, they should be visiting, whether it's a Sunday school classrooms or a children's ministry, church service of sorts, they should be visiting. If you have a high school department or a college, have the missionaries also talk on a Wednesday night or on a Sunday morning. So you really want to bathe those different departments at one church, for example, with your missionaries. That's really key. And I do think not having to wait until, okay, now they're 18 or now they're, they
Right.
could possibly go to Mexico because they're 16 or something like that. Don't wait. That's not what you want to do. You want to start as early as you can in early childhood, kindergarten, first grade, whatever. But you want to start there and you want to already have a pipeline so that as you create awareness and you put together classes, whether it's perspectives or kairos or whatever, that's a staple. It should be a staple in your church. That way it can catapult, in our case, with Urbana Conference. So if
Yeah,
I wait every 3 years for something catalytic, it's not going to happen. You have
that's
to
right.
work early on so that those things then take up root.
That's
So
awesome.
that's one of the things that I like to do. And I also believe that working with a mobilizer can really add an element. So I work with a mobilizer here in Southern California. And so we tag team together as to how can we promote certain mission activities or classes, or maybe even a short-term trip, so that we always have that up front. And so having lots of coffees and Chick-fil-A doesn't hurt either. So there you
That's
go.
awesome. Great answer, Laura. That's super good. Josh, as again, wearing the two hats as a mobilizer, what would if you put on your mobilizer hat for a second, you looked at the local church, what would you be so excited to see a local church do before a person came to the mission agency? What would be helpful in that pathway?
Yeah, a lot of things. And I mean, they're doing a lot of these things too. But I think just the engaging, walking alongside, Laura, you're talking about that, but journeying together with people. One thing that strikes me is provide a community for them to do this in. Younger generation, I mean, they want to do this side by side. They want to work together with others, which is amazing. And so try to create those spaces. Maybe it's multiple churches coming together to do that, or multiple, agencies or different things, but providing kind of that cohort, kind of community, learning community together to process what they're experiencing with other people who are further along and who are starting out. I think if I saw people coming with that kind of experience and investment from the local church, walking with them, that would really excite me.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's great, Josh. So true.
Michael, I have
Yeah,
to say that you do have to believe that God is still calling young leaders.
that's right.
If you don't believe it, then
That's right.
then you don't journey along.
Yep.
But unfortunately, many will say, I don't think this generation is ready, or I don't think this generation is interested. Don't do that. Believe it. God is still at work. The apostolic call is still there.
That's right.
And it's our privilege to do that.
And
Totally.
invite them into it.
Yeah, that's
So
right.
many, and you know, are ready. But I hear over and over, putting that agency hat back on. So many people's stories have a point in it where they were invited by someone.
That's right.
Hey, would you think about joining my team, or would you
That's right.
consider missions or pray about that? The power of an invitation, a sincere one, not just blanket ones across the board, but a real invitation for someone to consider and to identify. I think you might have what it takes, or God could grow that in you. Can I walk alongside you as
Absolutely.
that is developed, and we'll help you as a local church do that. There
Yeah.
is so much power in inviting someone into that, that people recall it from 20, 30 years ago when I
Yeah,
hear their
definitely.
story, as a moment, a key moment in their trajectory towards global missions.
Yeah, that's
That's it.
right.
That's it. I could attest to that. I can testify. And that would be me. That would be me. Yeah.
That's
Good.
awesome. Well, we're gonna move to wrap up here. Again, there is so much content in this report that you can dive into in different ways. And we want you, when we put out these reports, we hope that they're actionable, that you can read through them and create action points and deal with them. And one of the tools we have at the end of the report this time that we haven't had before is a list of questions for you to consider, for you to sit down with a volunteer team or your pastors and staff and elders and really start talking through how are we engaging with these things from our church perspective. Laura, I know we talked about that a little bit before we started. What would be an idea that you would do with your church team with a report like this or others?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, knowing that we have several mission committees, I probably would give them a sample or a report such as this one and give them some homework. And then, meet up a month later and say, what stood out, or here's something I believe that God is calling us into. And so if I preface with, this is what I believe God is calling us into, obviously, through thoughtful prayer, then we can collaborate together, put our heads together and say, in light of what the report says and what we're doing, does it match?
Yeah, definitely.
And where do we go if we have further questions? And I'm sure giving Carlos a call would be the next step.
That would be a good step too.
Give Jesus a call first.
That's great. That's great. Well, thank you all for being on here. Hey, Carlos, I was going to give you a moment. Just talk about what Nexus events are. I know that we have some that we're planning in the future here in different places, but what are the Nexus events that we're trying to do for church mission leaders?
Sure thing. Absolutely. I love the fact that a lot of the things that we just discussed, I just need to say ditto. We do it all in one day in the Nexus. But basically, the Nexus are one-day in-person events that we are holding in different regions of the country. We had one in November in Southern California. We just had one last month here in Central Florida. We are putting everything together to be able to do something in Michigan area, Chicago maybe, or Dallas. But these are events that we do so we can have church mission leaders from different regions, cities, or areas meet, get together that one day, and just be able to, first of all, meet each other. A lot of them don't even know that in their own backyard, they have these same-minded, same-hearted other church mission leaders, so they could actually collaborate. But at the same time, we also provide tools. We provide that space for them to be able to learn and grow in these areas that we are seeing them say to us, we need help with these areas. So that's what we're doing. We call it the Nexus, which is a church mission leaders summit. And coming to your town at some point.
That's right. You're even working on one for your home country of Puerto Rico, I think, aren't you?
That's right. That's right. I'm putting
that's going to be
something
awesome.
so I can have a Nexus event in Puerto Rico, and I know Michael is going to be joining me.
I totally am going to be joining you for that one.
He needs to go.
So, and again, even like Josh up there in South Carolina, there's regional groupings that already meet. If it would be helpful to have Carlos has come up there and join Josh at their event. If that can be a resource in a way that we could help with the gathering that already exists, we would love to have that happen.
Absolutely.
So, panel, thank you for being here. Any final comments before we wrap up today?
Actually, just really quickly, I love the section in the report that says, in the words of the church mission leaders, and we just allow them to just open space, just speak about what's the biggest issue going on in your world. And we put that there. This is what they are actually saying. It's not being filtered through. It's just these in their own words. I love that. I love that.
It's a really good section.
Yeah.
Well, Laura and Josh and Carlos, thank you for joining me today. Super thankful for each of you. And mission leaders, I hope that this content helps you and that as you hear from us today, you go on and engage with this content in the Church Mission Leader Report. If there's something in there that you think is missing, then let us know. The next time we do this, we're always revising it. We want to serve you with the needs that you have. And or if there's an area that really helps or you need a connection on, again, let us know so that we can help you find those things that you need as you lead your churches toward fulfillment of the Great Commission. So thanks for being with us today. God's blessing on you. And until next time, we'll see you later. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you.